did a restaurant with a girlfriend, and I decided that we were working in Leavenworth at the Edelweiss at that time. That was years ago when Leavenworth just first changed over. And we decided, hey, both our bosses drove gold Cadillacs. We thought, there's something wrong with this picture. So she was a great pie maker, great gal. And I pretty much was the people person. And we started a restaurant. Both my boys cooked. My daughter waited tables. A lot of relatives worked for me. A lot of her daughters worked for us. We had quite a time. That restaurant has been very successful. It's a Big Y Cafe, and I'm still really proud of that today. I worked with a lot of young people. I trained a lot of kids how to work and how to be successful, and I have a lot of them that come back to me. I mean, I'm like mom to a lot of kids in the Upper Valley. I spent a lot of time with them because I worked right alongside them. When you've had all you can take of something, I mean, it has to take a lot for you to give up. A lot. But when you give up, you have to have some place to go. I went to the Lord. He helped me through this. I wouldn't have had the strength to do all that I did had I not had a relationship with God. If you didn't have a good heart, and you weren't around very long, because I didn't want to waste my time and everyone else's time on someone that didn't have heart, that didn't care, that didn't want to care. And I fought for some to make them care, but I wasn't wonderful with everybody. I mean, I chewed some serious butt many times. But then I always came back for them. I mean, they knew I cared about them. If I didn't care about them, I wouldn't have bothered trying to teach them. I didn't just try to teach kids how to work. I wanted them to be a better person, to be proud of themselves. Most teenagers, I think, have a hard time. I think you struggle in your teen years with your self-worth, with who you are, who you're going to be, what you want. But if you just sit down and think about it, really think about it. I look at all these kids today and drugs and all the things that are going on that makes their lives so miserable. I've learned that more people are interested in what I have to say than I ever thought they would be. I never thought anyone would ever be that interested in what I had to say. But all of a sudden, it seems like you want to know what I think. Now, I think that's just marvelous. Lots of times I think it came through prayer. I think you have to believe in something. And believing in yourself is probably the most important thing that you'll ever do for yourself. But I always just figure, if you want to do something, there's a way. If you work hard. I mean, not everything's possible, but I think most things, if people give their heart to it and work for it, can be successful in any job that they decide to do.
So if you said to me, how did I plan all this? I haven't a clue. I think, took the opportunities when they came. And I think that's really, in many ways, the secret. I wouldn't say I'm the brightest guy in the park by any stretch of the imagination. I think the one thing I did too is I wanted to do something. I saw the opportunities and I took them. And give me not the man who can do the surgery or the operation, but rather the man who knows when to operate. That's just huge, huge. And maybe it's difficult, as I said, from a lay perspective, but, when do you operate? What's the time? And also learn that you don't rush your patients, you rush between your patients. So time, and some patients demand more time than others, etc. But I think that for me, it was a critical thing. So listening is a huge part, I think. You've got to be prepared to never give the impression that you're rushing. And it pays off in terms of just spending time, etc., and going over the cases and make sure they've got everything answered. I didn't know any of my grandparents, I should say my grandfathers. The situation in Ireland at that time was people were inclined to get married later. So in fact, they didn't have families until later. And that was probably largely economics, I'd say. But if there's one regret that I have is stories that I've heard later on. God, I wish I'd heard that, or I didn't hear it at all, etc. And Teresa said at one of your meetings recently, one of the younger men basically said, God, this is a great idea. I got to go back and talk to my grandparents and grandfather. I would say that is a very rich thing to do because it's lost in a decade. It's lost in a generation. Well, for me, I was out this morning. You walk up that valley at the moment with the flowers, well, you know the way they are. It's a spiritual experience. The birds are singing out there, and it really doesn't matter how the stock market is doing or what decision. Realizing we're all going to be 6 foot under, so enjoy this while you can. At least this is where it's at. It really doesn't matter how much you accumulate in this life. It's really how I'm enjoying it at the moment, and it's there on your doorstep. It really is. When I think about the United States, I think about the real treasures of the United States are the parks and the forests. They really are, the parks and the forests, and they must never. We must always keep it control. And I think that's the beauty about here, is the Land Trust have done a great job here, I think, in terms of preserving a lot of the good stuff for people around. But my brother told a story about him one time, because I think the important thing about teaching is nurturing. And it's to recognize the talents of the skills of those kids coming up. In fact, this is what the old GP to me said. He said the most important thing about leadership is recognize the skills and the talents of the younger generation coming up behind you and nurture those. And that is so true. It really is. But I don't want to sound big-headed, because I've been here. If there's anything that I can be helpful in terms of it, I'm more than happy. But you are it now. You're the new generation. I'm going to be dependent on you guys from here on in. Because let's put it this way, my success has been built on the shoulders of those both patients and people have gone before me. It sounds a cliche, and but it's true.
And as life went on, things changed. There were more. In fact, I was worried because of my mom and dad, because they were the ones that said you need to marry a Catholic, and I was the first one that didn't, and but they didn't. But they didn't. They just felt, that everything will be okay. It just, as long as you go to church, I think was their main thing. And so that worked out. Mm-hmm. Honest, always very, he taught me really some things that being, about faith, being faithful. I don't know. There was just something about it that he was just a good person. And I think he's there, close to it. It's not. But anyway, it was just a good relationship. I miss him. Yeah. And there was no other guy for me. So that's why I just, my friends and family, Jan, how come you're not looking for, that's okay. Fred was enough. He was my, yeah. So he made my life good. He did. I I thank him. I go see him every once in a while out in the cemetery. I had more empathy for kids that had issues, just because he also had a temper, my brother, that had the seizures. And he, if he got upset and he could be almost violent. And so that's why we always were worried. But at school, there were times when I just knew that and it was mostly boys. There was one girl, but this one boy, he had potential. I knew he'd be okay someday. He was just going through something and he did not have a real good life at home. Mm-hmm. We had one boy that was kind of alone a lot, and one of the students took him in under their wing, and I'll never forget that. That was a lesson to me, in that he had compassion for this boy that was sitting by himself and would go sit with him because nobody else would. And this one boy, the reason I paid for his fee, his parents did not have the money. So I paid his fee because he needed his diploma to get into the military. He was leaving in June, and it was like soon. I mean, after school was out, the end of June, I think it was. And I said, I will pay it. And he says, I'll pay you back. And no, I says, you just pay it forward someday. When you can help somebody else, you do that. I really enjoyed the kids that I got to know. Yeah. And so I learned a lot being a secretary at school because of that different kid. And I think you have to take your time, though. You have to use your time to help them, because they're the ones that are needing that help.
I was born here in Wenatchee in the old St. Anthony's Hospital on February 1st, 1931, a little over 90 years ago. So it's been a while. In 1931, when they drove from Ephrata in a rental car to Wenatchee, my family lived in Ephrata. They were just building Rock Island Dam, the first dam on the Columbia River, which I think is interesting because all of the dams on the Columbia River have been built in my lifetime. When I was in junior high school, one of my school teachers, Mrs. Matthews, was taking a health class, and I'm sure everyone's taking a health class. And she told me that she thought I would really make a good doctor. And right then I decided that's what I wanted to do. To me, surgery was a craft. You started as an apprentice, you're a low man on the totem pole. You're in these operations, you're holding a retractor for 3 hours or 4, whatever it takes, and watching. And then pretty soon you're doing, the most basic stuff. And then you just advance, and finally you're a journeyman, and then you're out on your own. And it's a constant learning experience because of the technology, the materials that you're using totally changes. I mean, surgery just in my era, I did not get into the non-invasive stuff because I was just too far along, and we had young people coming in that were being trained in it, and we wanted them to get the experience. They didn't need to share it with me. Same company every summer for all those years. And so I knew a lot of those, I'm driving a cement truck and a gravel truck and that kind of thing. It started as a laborer, and it was a thrill to have them come to me as a patient. I love seeing those guys. It was just, they were so, those are the people that mentor you. I think we stratify ourselves, and that's not good. That's too bad. My best, in my group of people I ski with and everything, there were a couple of doctors, but nobody else, they're doing something else. I had no desire to only be with the people I worked with or whatever didn't make any difference. Part of that maybe is growing up in a small town, working on construction, working in construction. Those are great people, They didn't go to college, but it didn't make any difference to me. I mean, they're just great people, and they can teach you a lot. Probably taught me more than anybody else on how to be a doctor, how to relate to people, how to be a hands-on person, how to be compassionate. I mean, I'm sure I learned more from them and, the downtown businessmen that let me pull the elevator up and down or, learn how to change a tire, go hang out around the service station, learn how to change oil, all that kind of stuff. I've had several relationships, with people who have done great things for me, and have told me that's how you pay it back. You pay back. How can I ever compensate you? How can I ever thank you enough for what you've done for me? You don't have to. You do the same. You pass this down the road. So they wanted me to be able to be a mentor. You're not even aware, I think, what they're doing until much later, and you realize how they directed or changed how you compute mentally, those kind of things, how you interact with people. You watch how they interact with people. And, I've been with people that just treat people like dirt. And it wasn't money. That's the other thing that's so important. It's not the amount of money you have that bring happiness to you. Yes, it's nice to have enough money to buy your kites and a new board once in a while and a new pair of skis, but that's not where happiness is.